People think miracles only happen in the sky, but sometimes Allah sends a miracle in the form of a human being. More than 1,100 years ago, when a deadly epidemic swallowed Baghdad and people cried for help, one Muslim man walked straight into the danger, not with fear, but with faith. His hands healed thousands, his knowledge changed the world, and his heart stayed connected to Allah every moment. This is the unbelievable true story of Abu Bakr Al-Razi, the Muslim scientist whose courage, tears, and sincerity still shake the world today. The Muslim scientist who saved a city. The untold story of Al-Razi. Abu Bakr Al-Razi was not born with answers in his hands. He was born with questions burning inside his chest like restless stars waiting to burst into light. And from the very beginning of his life in the busy streets of Ray in Persia, he felt something calling him toward knowledge, something deeper than curiosity, something spiritual, something that whispered that Allah had placed in the human mind a spark that was meant to search, see, and heal. And that whisper became the foundation of a story so powerful that the world still remembers him more than 1,000 years later. As a young man, Al-Razi often stood in the marketplace listening to the sounds of merchants, children, and travelers from distant lands, yet his heart listened for something else, something beyond the world of noise, because he believed knowledge was a form of worship, a path toward Allah, and a duty to humanity. And this belief pushed him to study chemistry, medicine, philosophy, astronomy, and every science that existed in his time until people began whispering about him. This young man is different, almost touched by the divine. But Al-Razi's journey was not smooth. He faced doubt, fear, frustration, and even failure. There were nights when he cried quietly while reading old manuscripts because he couldn't solve a problem. And there were mornings when he felt the weight of people's criticism pressing heavy on his chest, telling him that knowledge had limits, that humans were not meant to explore too deeply. But Al-Razi would simply lift his gaze to the sky and say, "How can there be limits when Allah is infinite?" And with that conviction, he continued his search. One of the turning points of his life came when he went blind temporarily due to long hours of studying chemicals. People laughed, saying, "This is the punishment for knowing too much." But Al-Razi did not complain. Instead, he whispered, "O Allah, if my eyes must dim so that others may see, then make my blindness a light for humanity." And with that prayer, he continued working even without full sight. His resilience stunned people, and soon he became one of the greatest physicians of the Islamic Golden Age, known for healing those who others had given up on. But the real miracle of Al-Razi's life came during an epidemic that struck the city of Baghdad, turning its streets into silent corridors of fear, with people collapsing, families grieving, and doctors fleeing because the disease seemed unstoppable. Al-Razi, however, refused to run. He believed it was his Islamic duty to stand with the suffering, for Prophet Muhammad taught that the one who helps another is helped by Allah himself. So Al-Razi entered Baghdad like a warrior entering a battlefield, with nothing but his medical tools, his books, and a heart full of faith. He began examining patients day and night, sleeping only for moments, eating only when others forced him. And yet his face always carried a calmness that made people say, "This man's strength is from heaven." One night, while walking through a dark alley searching for herbs that could help him treat the strange fever that was killing people, Al-Razi suddenly heard a child crying. He followed the sound and found a small boy sitting near his mother who was unconscious, shivering, and barely alive. The boy cried, "Everyone left us. Will Allah also leave us?" And in that moment, something inside Al-Razi broke. He lifted the woman gently, whispering, "Allah never leaves those who call him," and carried her to his small clinic. That night he studied her symptoms with trembling hands, shaking not from fear, but from the heavy responsibility he felt. He mixed herbs, heated remedies, wrote notes, prayed, and tried one treatment after another until finally the woman's breathing steadied, her fever dropped, and her eyes opened. The boy ran to her, crying, kissing her hands, and thanking Al-Razi repeatedly. That moment became a turning point in the epidemic because the treatment he discovered that night, after hours of desperation, hope, and dua, became the foundation of what saved thousands of lives. People began calling him the Mercy of Baghdad, saying Allah had sent him as a healing to the city, just as rain is sent to dry earth. But the story did not end there. Scholars from every corner of the Muslim world began writing letters to him seeking guidance. The Caliph of Baghdad invited him to lead the biggest hospital of the era, and Al-Razi agreed, but only on one condition: let the poor be treated before the rich. His condition shocked everyone, but it reflected the true Islamic values he lived by. He walked through the hospital daily, checking each patient with the tenderness of a father and the precision of a scientist. He encouraged his students to ask questions, challenge ideas, and search deeply because he believed seeking knowledge was like worship, something that brings a person closer to Allah if done with sincere intention. His books changed the world. He wrote the famous Al-Hawi, a medical encyclopedia so advanced that European doctors used it for centuries. He discovered new medicines, explained diseases in ways no one had before, and showed the world that science and spirituality were not enemies, but companions walking the same path under the guidance of the Creator. Yet his greatest emotional moment came during his old age. One day, a young student asked him, "Teacher, with all your achievements, what do you feel when you look back at your life?" Al-Razi closed his eyes and said softly, "I feel like a servant who spent his life knocking on the doors of Allah's knowledge. Whatever I discovered was only because Allah allowed me to see what others could not." Tears filled the student's eyes because in that moment he saw not a genius, not a legend, but a humble Muslim man whose heart beat only for truth, healing, and service. Many called Al-Razi a giant of science, but he called himself a small man walking in the shadow of Allah's mercy. His story spread across lands, inspiring countless others to pursue knowledge with humility and faith. Even after his passing, people remembered him not just for his discoveries, but for his character, his kindness to the poor, his courage during the epidemic, his patience during blindness, his tears in prayer, and his belief that every human mind is a gift from Allah meant to benefit creation. Today, when we look back at the Islamic Golden Age, we see many stars, but some shine brighter than others. Stars like Al-Razi, who turned suffering into healing, knowledge into worship, and science into a pathway to Allah. His story whispers a message to every heart. If Allah places a spark inside you, don't let fear put out, for that spark might be the light that heals the world. And maybe this is why his name still echoes through time. Not as a scientist alone, but as a believer whose search for truth became a witness to the greatness of Allah. His life teaches us that greatness is not measured by fame, but by sincerity, effort, and service. It teaches us that the mind is a trust from Allah and knowledge is a responsibility. It teaches us that true Muslims are those who heal, help, and uplift others. And if anyone ever feels small or unimportant, let them remember Al-Razi, a man who started with nothing but curiosity, faith, and a heart that refused to give up, and went on to change the world. His story is a reminder that Allah does not choose the strongest or richest to carry his signs. He chooses the sincere. And if we are sincere, then no matter how dark the world becomes, we can become sources of light just like he was. This is the legacy of Abu Bakr Al-Razi, a legacy written not only in books, but in the hearts of those whose lives he saved, whose minds he inspired, and whose souls he touched with the purity of his intention. And perhaps if you're watching this right now, Allah is telling you something too, that the world still needs healers, thinkers, givers, believers, and people of sincerity, and maybe you're meant to be one of them. My dear brothers and sisters, if this story touched your heart, then imagine the reward of sharing knowledge that inspires millions. Support our mission on Deeninminute by subscribing, liking, and commenting. Every time you share a story that brings someone closer to Allah, you become part of their journey, part of their reward, and part of the light that spreads across the world. Hit the bell icon, join our family of believers, and help us bring forgotten Islamic legends back to life. May Allah make you a source of guidance for others. Ameen.